Hello everyone and welcome to my Ninja deck profile. This is actually a remake of what my deck was going to... This is my second time basically of trying to do a deck profile. I made some drastic changes to the deck initially to the point that I had to delay this video for a week, and that's why the Skull Warrior deck list profile went up on my blog first. But now that I've got time to redo the recording for the different, the new Ninja deck that I just made, here I am. So, starting off, obviously, with Katana World Flag, but the buddy is Source Speed Mungo Tsukikage. He costs a life, and when he enters the field, you can discard a card. And if you do, grab a card with Gojin Maru and its name from your deck to your hand and shuffle. And if he's on the field or in the soul of a ninja, all ninjas get 3,000 power, 3,000 defense, and a crit. You always are going to call him to the field and then use him as Goji Maru's soul. So there's absolutely no reason why just not to have him as buddy. Plus also the buddy gift just kind of pays for the one life anyway, so it's just kind of a free call regardless. So yeah, and then also there is Tsukikage Ribi in the deck, which I'll get to, but it's just essentially there's 8 copies of this card in the deck essentially. So starting with the size 1s, obviously I run 4 copies of Source Speed Mungo Tsukikage. I just explained everything, why you run him, so we'll just move on to the next. The Byakuya I'm running is Byakuya Shiroyasha mode, which might seem weird and why I wouldn't run Source Speed Mungo Byakuya. Well, Goji Maru doesn't have... The Goji Maru I'm running is the Impact version, and he does not have Shadow Dive by himself. So I run this Byakuya, and really the main field is going to be Impact Goji Maru and Tsukikage Ribi. So between the Souls of Goji Maru and the discard fodder ability of Tsukikage Ribi, there's already kind of like a pseudo anti-destruction effect on the field to protect Goji Maru. So I didn't really feel like Byakuya, Source Speed Mungo Byakuya was needed, and this deck is basically not aggressive at all if Impact Goji Maru doesn't have Shadow Dive. So yeah, I run this one to give him Shadow Dive to make him a little more of a threat. So he'll be 3 crit with Source Speed Moonglow Tsukikage with Shadow Dive. So not great, but better than without it. That being said, too, normally Tsukikage Ribi will be on the side, but you can always have an extra copy of Source Speed Moonglow Tsukikage, so Goji Maru has 4 crit. And even more, attack and defense. So the options for the sideboard, the side option, the size 1 with Goji Maru, there's a little bit of flexibility if you want to be more aggressive or more defensive. So that's why I run this Byakuya. Next, as the last size 1, there's not a lot of size. Honestly, there's not even a lot of monsters in the deck. But for size 1s is Nanomachine Ninja Tsukikage Ribi. He is a tutor, and he has his nanomachine replacement ability, but the tutor skill is when he enters the field, you can grab 2 size 1 Katana World monsters with different names other than himself from your deck and put it to your hand and shuffle it. And then if you do grab 2, you have to discard a card from your hand, and you could actually even discard one of the cards you grab. So there's really no reason not to just grab 2 at all times. Between this being a good tutor for the deck and this helps thin out the deck of more monsters, because you actually mainly, once you get to Goji Maru, you just want Ninja Arts. That's all you want. That's all you need. So playing this once or twice in a turn helps at least filter out the Source Speed Mungo Tsukikage and the Shiroyasha mode Byakuya. So yeah, just a consistency tutor really, and like I said, helps thin the deck. Next, into size 2s, is 4 copies of Guardian Electro Beast Goryo. She just helps kind of keep some consistency. I honestly was trying to find a Ninja Arts to replace her. Well, before I get into that, let me just read her abilities first. You can only call her once per turn, and when she enters the field, you look at the top 3 cards of your deck and put 1 to your hand and drop the rest to the discard. Most of the time, unless you're struggling to even get to Goji Maru, most of the time you'll probably just grab a Ninja Arts thanks to her. So she's kind of like a pseudo Ninja Arts, but if you need her for monster grab, then she works as that too. I really tried to see if I could find a Ninja Arts to replace Goryo, but she just kind of brought a certain level of consistency to the deck that I couldn't find elsewhere, especially in like a Ninja Arts format. And she, like I said, she's already kind of a pseudo ninja arts because you can just play her, grab a, uh, check top 3. The deck is mainly comprised of ninja arts, so you're bound to find at least one. And then just discard the rest. Also, worst case, if you have Goji Maru and you draw into Godio, I do run Shinobi Scrolls in the deck. Like, worst case, you could just pay a gauge, throw Godio, underneath, and then just try to draw for Ninja Arts. So there's ways to get rid of her if you don't need her. But yeah, she's just really I kind of see her as kind of like an oil in the deck. She just kind of keeps things lubricated and just keeps things consistent. Next for size 2s is 3 copies of, let me turn them sideways here, Goji Maru Ghoul Deity Arts Dance of Yashagami. He's pretty hefty cost-wise at 2 gauge, and put in a Tsukikage and a Byakuya card from your field into his soul. Let me get a little bit closer because the text is a little tiny. His second ability is at the end of the battle that he attacks, you can discard a Ninja Arts, and if you do, he gets double attack, so you can basically attack one more time. But the real point of the deck, the first ability, the discard to get double attack is not a bad ability, but the main point of this is to kind of be a pain in the butt with the third ability. When your opponent casts a spell, you can discard Ninja Arts and pay 2, and if you do, you nullify the spell cast by the opponent, and you deal 2 damage to your opponent, and this is not once per turn. I have gotten, from test hands, I've gotten pretty consistently at least 3 chances to spell null in a turn. And sometimes 4, it's not even that hard to get to 4 really. 2 is pretty easy. 1 is a guarantee. 2 is pretty, if you play the deck right, 2 is basically guaranteed. But 3, you might struggle a little bit to get to 3 spell nulls in a turn, but 4 is definitely viable. It's not just like a 1% chance. Anything more than 4, and I feel like it starts to be kind of RNG. Just luck on the draw of what you get. But yeah, he's kind of the main boss monster. And with Sword Speed Mungo Tsukikage, he's 8/8 normal, but with Sword Speed Mungo, he becomes an 11/3/11. And if you have 2 Sword Speed Mungo Tsukikages, he becomes a, if I can math, 14/4/14. So he can get pretty big. So yeah, pretty good threat for size 2. On to Ninja Arts, and boy do we have a lot of them. The first is Art of Truancy. And you might initially be like, where's Shiden? Because we just literally skipped past Shiden, and now we're into, especially Shiden's always been like a staple for a very long time. And Art of Truancy, at least for this deck, basically is Shiden. It's a set spell. The first ability is completely pointless for Tsukikage Brother Ninjas because it just prevents Deity Dragon Tribe monsters and items from being destroyed. But the second effect is the same as Shiden, where you can drop a Ninja Arts from your hand and pay a gauge to draw 2. Really, you might argue and say, oh, well, Shiden's a monster, so, you get an attack with Shiden. Shiden has 3,000 power and 1 crit. He's basically nothing on the field. And I had him in the deck for a while, and I literally just kept calling over him with, you need Tsukikage Re-B and Sword Speed Tsukikage and Shiro Yashimode Byakuya. There's no space for Shiden anyways. So you might as well have a set spell that you can just, every turn if you need to, just pay a gauge and discard a card to draw 2. And, you might even think, well, what if I just leave Shiden on the field? If you try to somehow make a formation with Shiden on the field, well, then I can just use them when my next turn comes around. And it's like, no one's going to leave a 3, it's easily destructible at 3/1/1. But no one's going to leave a draw engine monster on the field. Size 0 could kill Shiden. It's a low effort card to kill. So at least with Art of Truancy, it's a set spell. It's a little bit of a higher bar to meet to destroy an Art of Truancy. And also Art of Truancy, unlike Shiden, Art of Truancy can actually sacrifice itself to, draw 2. If you have 2 Art of Truancies, play 1 on the field, and then just pay a gauge, discard the other Art of Truancy. If it's a dead card. Or use it for Goji Maru, or, there's a few, Tsukikage Re-B if you need to keep. So there's reasons that, even if you have a quote-unquote dead copy of this card in your hand, you can find other uses for it. It's not truly dead. So, yeah. So, sorry for the long-winded explanation of that one, but that was, honestly, Art of Truancy replacing Shiden was one of the biggest things that kind of made me kind of rethink how this deck runs. But anyways, before we get into more of the thick of things, let's just go through a few easy ones. Clear Serenity, by God, this deck needs Gauge. Gojimaru's cost and summon is expensive, so you just need 4, and it's a Ninja Arts. So if you have too much Gauge, cool, just pitch this for Gojimaru. Like, there's no downside to just running 4 Clear Serenities, and you can also play a copy during your turn, play a copy during the opponent's turn. You got 6 Gauge. Woohoo! You got 3 Spell Nulls right there. So, yeah, it's just an easy, good consistency Gauge gain card. Next, not too far behind Clear Serenity, is Art of Warm Pleasant Happiness. It's a weird name, but I'm going to try to get a little close up here so you can see it because the text is small. But its cast cost is you put up to 3 Ninja Arts from your drop zone to the bottom of your deck in any order, and you can choose one of the 2 abilities, and you can only play this card once per turn. For each card you put for this card's cast cost, you can summon a size 0 Dragod token with 6,000 power, 6,000 defense, and 2 crit. This ability is really not what's used for in this deck. It's there, sure, if you want to try to just clinch off a game with, a couple 2 crit hits. But usually games are not decided that well. The second ability is for each card you do put back, you gain a Gauge and a life. So if you put 3 cards back, you gain 3 Gauge and 3 life. And again, this is counter at any time. It's almost a better Clear Serenity if it didn't have the cost requirement. But yeah, it just helps with more Gauge consistency and more Gauge gain. So. And it also, again, like Art of Truancy, it's Ninja Arts itself. I mean, if you have a copy of Art of Warm Pleasant Happiness in the drop and you play the card, just put that copy back into the deck. So it's not, it's not, again, like Shiden, where it's like Shiden is a monster, but it requires a Ninja Arts, a different typing to, work. So self-synergy is really strong with cards. Next, every Ninja player knows the card. Futon Sweeping Whirlwind. Has 1 or 2 abilities. You can cast it from your hand just to grab a ninja from the drop and add it back to your hand, or if you discard this card by a card effect, you gain a Gauge and draw a card. 99% of the time, you're probably going to use this to use Gojimaru's either double attack ability or spell null ability. And you gain a Gauge and double attack. So if you spell null with this, cool. The spell null literally costs it a Gauge. Pretty cheap to nullify spell and deal 2 damage. So I can't think of really any Ninja deck that doesn't run Futon to some degree. It's just an absolute staple. Next, and this was actually another card that kind of flew under my radar for a bit, and then I added it, is Art of Getting Fish. The first ability is completely useless because, or I'm sorry, not the first ability, the second ability. So we'll just focus on the first ability. The first ability is when it is dropped by card effects, you gain 2 Gauge. So, perfect Gojimaru spell null. Pay 2 Gauge, discard a card to nullify a spell, and you gain 2 Gauge back. You just basically lost 1 hand card. That is not bad at all. And that is not once per turn. This card I can imagine being kind of annoying for players, because like let's say you have Gojimaru on the field with 2 Gauge, and you got a decent hand, like maybe 4 or 5 cards in hand. And your opponent might think, oh, okay, he can only nullify 1 spell, so it's like, okay, I'll just play this to juke it out, and then, I'll really play my turn afterwards. Well, you play, you nullify the first spell, and then you gain 2 Gauge, and now your opponent's back at square 1, and it's like, oh, crap, that's annoying. And who knows, I've had 2 or 3 of these in hand. You're just like, yeah, just stop, So, yeah, this is honestly... I honestly struggle to find which one is actually technically better with Futon or Art of Getting Fish, because the getting Ninja Arts in hand is a lot easier than the Gauge cost, generally speaking. So while the 1 Gauge for Futon is nice, the 2 Gauge here, just to kind of be prepped and ready for another attempt, is real good. So, but both are equally good, so it's not like you shouldn't run one over the other or something. Next, to round out the discard trio, is the least good, but still totally viably good. Discard fodder, Ninja Arts, Hiding in Fallen Leaves. At counter speed, you gain 3 life. This is like literally never used unless it's kind of like someone tries to impact you for game, and you gain 3 life to stay alive. That literally has never happened to me, but hey, it's there. And then the other ability, which is the more important part, is when it's dropped by a card effect, you gain a life and draw a card. So this is kind of, instead of a Gauge and draw like Futon, this is a life and draw. Not a bad card, but out of the 3, I think Hiding in Fallen Leaves is kind of the least good. But that's just apples to oranges, like just a 1-to-1 comparison. The card in general is still good. Like any Ninja Arts deck is still going to run this card. So don't think I'm saying this card is trash and don't run it. So next, and this is actually kind of, this is what I chose, but feel free to pick something else if you see so fit. But I chose Catan Blazing Armor for some defense slash a little bit of burn. The deck seems like it's going to be more like a burn slash Shadow Dive deck than like an actual like super aggressive, just wipe the board and attack the opponent kind of deck. But yeah, Katana Blazing Armors, you can only cast it when a monster in your field is being attacked. You choose a Katana World monster on the field, and for the battle, it gets 5,000 defense and burn. So at least you always consistently get the burn. And with Gojimaru, at least having 11,000 defense, if not potentially 14,000 if you have 2 Source Speed Mungo Tsukikages on the field. Well, one in his soul and one on the field. I mean, he's going to be at 14,000 defense potentially, so 5,000 more. I mean, 19,000 defense. That's, minus Chaos and maybe Lost World. Like, that should basically stop any attack. And honestly, worst case, sometimes I just use this for discard fodder. So, it's a little flexible if you want to use defense or if you need it for spell nulls. So, but again, this can be like easily replaced with like Shadow Stitching if you want. Or I'm trying to think if there's any other kind of like real significant Ninja Arts spells. But no, nothing's really coming to mind. Maybe even Celestial Arts Returning Water potentially. I don't run that in this deck, but that's still another perfectly viable Ninja Arts spell to run. So yeah, it's a little bit of a flex pick there. I'm not gonna say like it absolutely needs it in the deck, but it's a flex pick. And then last is 4 copies of Shinobi Scrolls. It's a set spell. You can only cast, or actually, no. Actually, you can have multiple of this on the field. That's right. I'm so used to saying you can only have one on the field. But no, you can have multiple Shinobi Scrolls on the field. You pay a gauge, and you put a card face down into its soul, and if you do, you draw a card. And you can look at this card's soul and cast any Ninja Arts by paying its cast cost. This card, I mainly throw like Clear Serenity and Art of Warm and Pleasant Happiness into it. The Clear Serenity or Warm and Pleasant Happiness basically pays for this gauge cost, and and then some. You get 2 more gauge back. I've also had it where if I have Gojimaru on the field and I draw into Goryo or one of the other monsters that you just don't need, like if you're just getting too many monsters, you could just throw it underneath Shinobi Scrolls and just try for another Ninja Arts. So it's a little bit of a cycle. It's not the best to do that because then it's obviously basically out of the game. But if you're struggling for Ninja Arts, that's something you can do. I typically try to only have 1 of this on the field, maybe 2 if I'm really pushing and need to keep drawing deeper. But yeah, 3 or more, it's like it starts to kind of eat your gauge too much. Also, keep in mind this does not have Soul Guard, so if you have, that's part of the reason why I don't usually leave many cards underneath this card, is because this card does not have Soul Guard. If you have like any amount of cards underneath the soul and your opponent's like, okay, destroy Shinobi Scrolls, they're all gone. It's like basically part of your hand's gone essentially. So I keep figuratively and literally, I guess, I keep the cards close to my chest. I don't leave them on the field too much. So that's that. And then I guess I would go over sideboard, but like sideboard to me is always kind of dependent on the player, so don't take these for gospel as like hard absolute sideboard cards. But in the sideboard, first is 4 copies of Art of Shadow Stitching. Like I said, I can swap this out if I need to with Catan to better slow down the opponent if need be. So you just pay a gauge when an opponent's monster is attacking, you pay a gauge and nullify the attack, and it can't stand. So really good, consistent attack stopper. Next, I guess I run this more for in case I run against Leviathan decks or just like weapon heavy decks. But I run 3 copies of Sword Skill, Bare Hand Intercept. You can only cast it when your opponent's attacking your monster with a weapon. You nullify and draw a card, so it's not like you're losing anything in your hand. Keep in mind this card does say weapon, not item, so things like Hero World do not work with this. Hero World, the monsters become items without the weapon attribute. You gotta make sure the card has weapon as an attribute. So that's why I kind of see this more as like a Leviathan item possibility. Granted, Leviathan attacks a lot, so it might not work that well. But like I said, it's just a thought of something you could, potentially use in sideboard. And last, well, technically there's two cards, but essentially they're the same thing. First is the 1 impact Secret Sword Dragon Vanquish formation. You can only cast it when it's in the soul of a Secret Sword lethal formation. It costs 2 gauge, nullify the call of a dragon type attribute monster, and deal 2 damage to the opponent. There's tons of dragons in the game. I mean, I'd say 3/4 of the archetypes are probably dragons, so this is, this is a totally viable, very common scenario to use this card. And then last card is 2 copies of Secret Sword Lethal Formation, which are basically just more copies of Dragon Vanquish Formation because you grab it from, drop, hand, or deck. The only place you really can't grab it is Gauge. So, obviously don't do that on purpose, but if it happens, that sucks. But yeah, it's just a set spell. You play it on the field, you grab the Dragon Vanquish Formation, throw it underneath. That's pretty much it. So, yep, so those are the sideboard. So that's pretty much it, guys. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. I try to, respond in a reasonable period of time if people have questions. But yeah, thanks for watching, and talk to you later.